Hello friends, I'm Shelley Clough, and today we are going to be painting these cute little still life bouquets. So what we're learning today is actually how to paint from life. I'm going to have a picture here on the screen of the bouquet that I am looking at right now so that you can get a feel for what I'm seeing as we're doing this. I've done this before with other floral arrangements in the spring and summer. Here's some examples of some of those other ones. And I wanted to walk you through how to do that for a little fall bouquet I have sitting in front of me right now. So the supplies that I'm going to be using today, I have a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper. It's this type here, but it's just been cut down to 5 by 7 inches. And I have some markers here that I'm going to be using. I'll link all these supplies down below as well. I have a pencil and some brushes that I'm going to be using, as well as my palette, and I'll link all that information below as well. So what I'm going to be doing, this is a workshop that I teach for my in-person classes fairly often, and I call it Expressive Still Life Mini Bouquets. It's kind of a mouthful. Sometimes I change the name up, but that's essentially what we're doing. We're painting from life, but in a way that is flexible and isn't going to be super intimidating. So the first thing that I do is I start with what's called a blind contour sketch. So the point of a blind contour sketch is to maintain a continuum of the hand and brain as you are looking at something that you're drawing. So what I do is I try to maintain eye contact with what I'm drawing, and at the same time as not really lifting my pencil from the paper. And I'll admit, I don't do this perfectly. I glance here and there to make sure that I'm doing it all right, that nothing's like super out of place. But there's supposed to be something kind of magical about not looking as you're going. And so what I'm doing is just trying to grab some of the key shapes that I see in this bouquet. I'm trying to get kind of the contours of some of the outer portions. And just grab little bits. I'm not trying to be super detailed. I want this to be very kind of sketchy looking. Just trying to grab some of the shapes that I'm seeing. Okay, so now that's kind of my basic sketch that I'm going to use. And then I'm just going to add a few more details as I'm looking at this. And sometimes I will deviate a little bit from what the bouquet actually looks like, just to create maybe a slightly more balanced painting. So I'm just trying to grab some of the key shapes that I'm seeing and not get too into the weeds. And I've done this pretty lightly in pencil because I'm going to be painting over it. And once you've painted over pencil, you won't be able to erase it very well. So I like to paint it nice and light, but I actually like the way the little sketchy marks kind of come through in the finished project. So if you can see here, got really light little sketchy marks in there, and I really like the way that looks, so I'm okay with it. So now I'm going to grab my markers, and this is a little piece of paper I have as my scrap paper, because sometimes with these markers, these are actually just Crayola markers. I've tried fancier ones. I like these the best, and they have a really cool effect when we add some water to it. But this little scrap paper is for me to check, because sometimes the colors that are on the lid are not quite the color that I'm looking for here. So this is going to be layer 1 of my painting, and what I'm going to do is try to grab some of the shadowy portions of my flowers. So generally, the shadow on an object is going to be on the lower side of it. So for example, this is my sunflower here. I don't want to color the whole sunflower in marker. These markers are really saturated and pigmented, and if I go really heavy with the marker, it's going to distort the look of the whole painting, and it's not going to look very realistic. So I just want to use the marker very sparingly to sort of place a little bit of color in some of the locations that I'm going to have it. So just that little bit of yellow there. And then I have these neat, they are like an orange colored tulip that I found. Got those at Trader Joe's. They're called, it was like Autumn Explosion tulips or something. And I just couldn't not get them for this bouquet. So I'm just marking a few of the little, so see kind of the bottom side of these flowers. So this little area is the whole flower. I'm just marking a little bit with the marker. And that's really important. Sometimes I teach this class and it's really hard for people not to mark the whole thing in marker. But when they do, the whole painting looks a little bit too saturated. Okay, and now I have some of these chrysanthemums that are sort of a rusty color. Let's see if I can find a marker that matches that. It's a little too brown. Let's try one more. Ooh, that one's pretty close. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit, some of these kind of fluffy looking flowers. I've got some in front here, some way in back here. Just some little bitsy marks. And then I've got some bits of greenery, and I've kind of got two tones of greenery. I've got a really light leafy green color for some of these, kind of that fluffy looking greenery. It's a little too bright. And then I have the stems of my tulips are kind of a leafier green. That one's pretty close. I'm just going to do a little bit right here, a little bit for some of my tulip stems, and I'm going to do a couple of little lines down here because some of my stems are that leafy green color. And then my other green is more of a mossy green. Sure, this will work. Just going to do a couple more lines coming down and then lightly mark some of these leaves, just little dashes of color. So you can see just how minimal I'm going with these marker bits. Oh, and then lastly, I have a rose. It's more of a vivid red. That's kind of in here. Just gonna outline kind of a little bit of it. So that looks a little funny right now. You know, it's not a whole lot of shape. And but what we're gonna do now is start to activate that that marker with our watercolor. So I'm gonna start with a small brush here. I've got this cute little size 4 brush by Winsor & Newton Cotman. And I'm just gonna wet that. And I'm gonna go in with just water to start. And when I touch this marker with water, it's going to activate it and move it around. So see this? This is my favorite part. This part is so fun. And I can take that color and sort of drape it around. So remember, this is my rose. So now that I've got the color down, I just want to build that shape out a little bit more. And then I'm going to get some of these fluffy mums. The main things that I am trying to do is capture the main texture of the flower. So these mums have really pointy little leaves, and the rose has a roundness to it. So I'm just trying to lighten up that marker, and I'm going to loosen up some of these. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do marker on my jar. Do that in just a second. Some of my greenery here. I love the sort of flowy, playful look that this gives. Some of these orange tulips. Okay, really quick, on my jar, I like to grab kind of a grayish blue. Okay, so on my jars, I like to grab kind of a grayish blue and just sort of run that marker along one side of my jar and maybe a little bit in the middle. And then I can activate that as well. These markers make for a really fun activity if you have little people in your house like I do. I have 4 kids, ages 10 down to 4. And for my 4-year-old, she loves, I will take watercolor paper and say write letters with these markers, and then she can just take a wet paintbrush and trace over the letters, and they activate with the watercolor. It's a fun little activity. Now I can go in and start to build in some of the depth for these flowers. So I'm going to start, my sunflower here has that deep dark center on it. So I'm going to grab, this is just Payne's Gray, and just with the little tip of that brush, these paintings, they're so tiny that you work with a really tiny little brush, and then you don't get wrapped up in the details too much, because you just can't create that much detail with such a tiny space. And then I'm going to mix up a green and get some of this greenery in here. So for my mossy green, let's see here, I've got some brown left. I added a little bit of viridian green to it. And these are kind of, they almost have like a eucalyptus color to them. I'm liking that color. So I'm going to come through and start grabbing some of these leaves, just little flicks of color. Got little bits kind of up in front here. I'm going to go over some of these stems again. So there's really just a lot of stems happening in here. I'm just making marks. I'm not really paying attention to what the stems actually look like. I'm just making some marks in that jar. Shh, don't tell anybody. It'll be our little secret. And a few leaves kind of poking back in here. And just dabbing a little color in the center area, because in general it's just sort of thick in that zone, but you can't, it's hard to differentiate what all you're looking at. Okay, and then I also have some of that really light green, kind of a bright leafy green. And I'm going to get some of this sap green for that. And a little bit of cadmium yellow. And I've got this kind of textured looking thing. So I'm just tapping my brush to sort of create that fluffy looking texture. And there's another one kind of dangling over here. And then going over some of these tulip strands. And then there's a couple little pieces of tulip leaves sticking out in there. I can really add things where I want to. Don't feel totally constrained by what you're looking at. This is still your painting. You get to decide ultimately what it looks like. So now I'm going to build up my sunflower a little bit more. Just taking this cadmium yellow, because this is a nice bright sunflower. And I just want to get, so they've got kind of that, the petals are sort of pointing upward on this one. So I'm just going to do a few flicks to capture that fluffiness. And then I've got this bit of greenery kind of in the background. Sort of a mix between the two greens. I'm going to build that up with this little area right here. Now I can build up my mums and my tulip color a little bit more. So you can see kind of the color of this is starting to come alive a bit more. I'm just building it up little by little. So my mums, again, is sort of a rust color. I think I'm feeling pretty good about that color. And I try, when I'm painting really tiny like this, I'll really tap my brush off several times on the palette just to make sure that I don't have excess moisture on there, because I'm painting with barely any paint. And now a trick when you're painting these little flowers, I'm trying not to go over everything that I did with the marker, because I sort of want some layering to be happening. And if I go over and make it all the same color again, then it's not going to have very much dimension. It's going to start looking kind of flat again. So I've got those. Now, to me, this looks a little imbalanced, so I'm going to come over here and just paint one over here. Maybe even a little bit down in there. I like that. Okay, now for these cute tulips. I feel like it's a little ironic to have tulips in the fall, but hey, they were at the store, so, and they were called autumn, explosion or whatever they were called. So that means they're allowed in the fall. So I'm using them. I hope you'll forgive me if that's offensive to you. Okay, so I'm trying to mix a nice vibrant orange because they have a nice punch of color to them. Okay, and again, trying not to go over everything that was laid down before so that I get kind of that washy look. Just going to put little bits of that orange in a few other places. That's probably good. All right, now I've got that pretty rose, and for that I'm going to do a combination of cadmium red and alizarin crimson. Gives me a nice kind of lush red color. I'm just going to do some little marks in the center and have it come down kind of in a U shape, because that's what I'm seeing from my angle. All right, now I'm also going to take this jar and kind of build that up. I've got this indigo color with a little bit of Payne's gray. I want it to be a really light wash of kind of a blue-gray color to capture the glass jar that this is in. So again, just sort of making little dainty marks, and then a little mark in the middle that looks like water. And then I'm going to take my clean wet brush. It's the fun part. And then I'm just going to activate that. Have it loosen up a bit. And then I like to get a little extra paint on my brush. I'm just going to, while that's all wet, let it do its thing. Okay, so now that I've got the body of this bouquet is all done, I'm just going to go in and tweak little things that feel like they need some help. So right now, like this sunflower kind of looks like it's floating. It doesn't really look anchored to the rest of this bouquet. So I'm going to try and add a little touch of stem kind of in there, giving it some more continuity. And then a little bit of greenery around it to help bring out those kind of pointy leaves. And then I'm going to bring that greenery down and around here. Now this part I have found, this is where I like to sort of exaggerate a painting a little bit by getting some leaves that maybe aren't necessarily there for real, but I want something else to be there. So I'm just going to bring a few little strands sort of coming out of this bouquet. Wherever it feels like it needs a little something. There are no rules here. I'm actually going to make my jar look just a little bit wider. So I feel like my sunflower looks off balance with it. Just sort of playing with deepening it and then lightening it, trying to get a happy medium of playfulness in there. I'm just building up a little bit of greenery right there at the entry point of the vase. Okay, I feel like that is pretty cute. Now, one of the final touches to this painting is I always like to add a little shadow. So I'm going to use that same like Payne's gray with a little indigo color. And I like to make a mark just off to the side here, kind of in front a little bit, and then give my brush a rinse, and then wet that so it kind of spreads out. Sometimes I'll come over to this side a little bit, add some extra color. Something about that just helps the whole thing look like it's real. Another optional bit that you can add, I'm going to do a little bit of, just a tiny bit of brown in my sunflower here, just to get a little bit more shape. See how I'm making little tiny marks of brown in between some of those petals. Just help to define it a little bit more. And then something that's fun, if you want to, if this feels scary, you don't have to do it. But I will get a really watery puddle of paint and swirl my brush in it, and then give a little tap tap. Hold on, I didn't get that watery enough. And this is a tiny brush. It works a little better with a bigger brush. But I just want to do a little bit of splatter on this. I think it kind of gives it a playful finish. So we're going to go. There we go. There is my cute little miniature fall bouquet. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I would love to hear any questions or thoughts that you have down below. Say hello from wherever you're watching from. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.